They didn't just challenge her authority, they came for her life. Hey family, before we begin this powerful story, I want to check in with you. How are you holding up? How's your heart? Wherever you are, whether you're watching from your kitchen or listening on your ride home, I pray peace and protection over you and your loved ones. Now, I need you to buckle in, because today we're stepping into a courtroom where the fight isn't just about law. It's about legacy, resistance, and the courage to stand firm when the system stares you down. This is the true story of Judge Camille Harris, the first Black female judge in Asheville, a woman who rose through flames, only to be met with a storm of hatred in the very room where she was called to uphold justice. Camille Harris didn't grow up expecting the world to be fair. She learned early on, walking past shop windows that never needed signs to say, "You don't belong here," that justice wasn't always dressed in robes. It was in her mother's voice. "You'll have to fight twice as hard to get half as far." Those words wrapped around Camille like armor, words that carried her from underfunded classrooms to the blinding scrutiny of law school, where her name was whispered more than spoken, and the seats beside her stayed mysteriously empty. But she didn't just endure, she excelled. She outread, outworked, and outlasted every voice that said she wasn't enough. And when she finally rose to the bench to become the first Black woman to wear that robe in her city, it wasn't just a personal win. It was a flag planted for every girl who had been told to sit down and be quiet. The day that would change everything started like any other. Judge Camille Harris stepped into her courtroom with that quiet dignity, the kind that makes people sit up a little straighter. Her robe moved behind her like a wave, not of fabric, but of history. But even as she took her seat, something felt different, heavy. The air was thick with tension, like the room itself was holding its breath. Her eyes scanned the courtroom, and that's when she saw Officer Karen Wolf. Karen wasn't new to the force, 25 years in, and they called her Iron Wolf, the kind of cop who made rookies flinch just by raising an eyebrow. She didn't just enter the room. She marched in, each step of her boot echoing like a challenge. And when she locked eyes with Camille, her smirk said everything her silence didn't. "You don't belong up there." Karen didn't sit like everyone else. She stood, arms crossed, jaw tight, gaze locked. Not because she was defiant of the law, but because she was defiant of who was enforcing it. Camille felt it, the chill under the collar, the unspoken warning. Today's not going to be a regular day. And she was right, because this wasn't about a courtroom ruling. It was about a woman in a robe and a woman in uniform, two powers, two worlds, and only one of them was ready to let the other exist. The proceedings began. Camille, as always, was composed, measured, respectful, but when it came time for Officer Wolf to take the stand, she didn't move, didn't blink. Camille looked down at her notes, then back up. "Deputy Wolf, please approach." The room fell still. Karen's voice broke through the silence like a blade. "No." You could hear the air leave the room. Even the stenographer looked up. The bailiff shifted, unsure. Camille set her papers down slowly, deliberately. "Excuse me." Karen leaned slightly forward. Her voice was low, cold, meant to pierce. "I'm not taking orders from people like you." There it was. The mask was off. The words weren't about legality. They were about identity. People like you. Not judges, not officers of the court. Black women. Camille's hands gripped the edge of her bench, but she didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She met that hate with a gaze that had crossed oceans of prejudice just to sit in that chair. "This is a court of law," she said evenly, "and either you comply or you leave." Karen stepped forward, slowly like a gunslinger sizing up her enemy. "Do what you gotta do, Judge," she sneered, "but I'm not going anywhere." And just like that, the gavel hit the wood. "Bailiff," Camille said calmly, "remove Deputy Wolf from this courtroom until she's ready to respect the law." Karen didn't resist, but her glare never left Camille's. And as the courtroom watched her being led away, a truth settled in the air like smoke. This wasn't just disobedience, it was war. And the bench, it had become the battlefield. Power doesn't fear the law, it fears exposure. Hey y'all, before we dive in, I just want to check in. How are you doing today? Are you staying grounded, drinking water, breathing deep? Because what happens next in this story, it's not just about what went down in court. It's about the ripple effect that truth can create when it finally finds a voice. And in this part, that voice comes from someone no one expected. Let's go. The courtroom was still buzzing. Even after Officer Karen Wolf had been escorted out, her presence lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Judge Camille Harris sat high on the bench, spine straight face calm. But inside, she knew something had shifted. This wasn't just a disruption, it was a declaration. Outside, whispers were already spreading. She said, "What to the judge? Can you do that?" She really said, "People like you?" But inside, Camille was already thinking ahead, because this wasn't over, not even close. Later that afternoon, the next case was called. Marcus Bryant stepped onto the witness stand. He looked tired, not just long day tired, but carrying the weight of being Black in America tired. Camille had seen that look before. She gave him a nod, gentle, steady, the kind that says, "You're safe here." "Mr. Bryant," the defense attorney began, "can you tell the court what happened the night of February 11th? Marcus hesitated. His hands gripped the edge of the stand so tight his knuckles went white. Then he looked up, right at Camille. She nodded again, and that's when he spoke. "I was coming home from work," he said, voice low. "Late shift at the warehouse. I was tired. Just wanted to get to my kids." He paused, and that's when she pulled me over. A quiet shift in the room. Everyone knew who she was. "She told me I didn't belong there," Marcus continued. "Called me a thug. Told me she could smell trouble just by looking at me." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the stenographer paused. Camille sat forward slightly, her hands folded, her jaw tight. "I tried to explain I wasn't speeding, that I worked nearby, that I was just going home. But she wasn't listening." His voice cracked now. "She twisted my arm, threw me on the hood of the car, and said I needed to learn my place." For a second, no one moved. Then Marcus looked up again. "I wasn't resisting. I wasn't angry. I was just scared. I just wanted to be treated like a person." His eyes found Camille's again, like a human being. The courtroom was frozen. Even the jury looked uncomfortable. Camille felt something deep inside her stir, not anger, but a slow, rising fire. Not just for Marcus, but for every brother, every uncle, every son who had never made it this far in the story. At the back of the room, Chief Raymond Ellis sat still, his fingers laced, his face unreadable, but his mind, it was spinning. Because this wasn't the first complaint he'd heard about Officer Wolf, but hearing Marcus speak, it made something click. "We might be dealing with more than just a rogue cop," he muttered to his aide. "Look deeper into her records, into her affiliations. I want to know if she's working alone." The aide nodded and slipped out the door. And just like that, the investigation began. That evening, Camille stayed late in her chambers. The courthouse had emptied, the halls quiet, but her mind was loud. She was halfway through reviewing case notes when her laptop buzzed. An anonymous message blinked on the screen. Just a few words, but they were ice on her spine. "You don't belong here. Leave or we'll make you." Camille stared at the screen. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just blinked, then closed the laptop. She sat still for a long moment, thinking, feeling, measuring the weight of those words. And then quietly she whispered, "I've heard worse. I've lived through worse," but she also knew this was just the beginning. Some threats hide behind screens, others come through your window with fire. Hey, family, before we go further, I just want to pause and speak directly to you. If you've ever had to smile through fear, if you've ever been told to tone it down, not stir the pot, or just let it go, then you already know what Camille Harris was feeling the night the fire came. Let's go. The courthouse had been quiet all day. Too quiet. But Judge Camille Harris didn't flinch. She'd handled disrespect, endured threats, stared hate in the face, and never blinked. Until that night, until they came for her home. It started with a sound, not a voice, not a message, but a crash, glass exploding, then a roar, flames. A firebomb burst through the living room window like it was shot from the heart of hate itself. Curtains caught instantly. The couch ignited like kindling. And in seconds, the quiet family home turned into a battlefield. Camille was at the dining table, still reviewing files by lamplight. Her husband, Jordan, had just finished the dishes. Upstairs, their daughter, Ava, was humming to herself, drawing stars and justice scales in her sketchbook. Then boom, then fire, then chaos. "Camille," Jordan shouted from the kitchen, "get Ava, now!" Camille bolted for the stairs. Smoke was already rising. The heat chased her like it had a score to settle. "Mama!" Ava's voice cried from the hallway. "What's happening?" Camille scooped her into her arms, heart pounding. "We're okay, baby, we're okay, just hold on." Downstairs, Jordan grabbed the fire extinguisher, but the flames were fast, angry, like they came with a purpose. Camille burst through the back door, Ava wrapped around her neck like a lifeline. The cold air hit them like grace. Outside, neighbors peeked from windows. Sirens wailed in the distance. And inside, the living room burned. Ava was shaken. So was Camille, but she wouldn't show it. She held her baby close and whispered, "You are safe. You are safe, and they will not scare us." By the time the fire trucks arrived, the house was already half lost. Police followed, flashlights, questions, cameras. But Camille, she stood in the yard barefoot, robe singed by heat holding her child, not broken, burned, but unbending. Later in the police station, Camille sat across from Chief Raymond Ellis. His brow was furrowed. His folder was thick. "This wasn't random," he said. "We found fragments of the same type of firebomb used in a string of attacks last year, all tied to a white nationalist cell." Camille didn't blink. "So who's helping them inside the system?" she asked. Ellis hesitated, then flipped the folder open. Officer Karen Wolf. Her name was highlighted, and beneath it, bank transfers, messages, a name, Travis McConnell, a known extremist, and Linda's secret partner. "You still want to be involved?" Ellis asked gently. Camille looked at him, then down at her burned hands, then back up. "I don't want to be," she said, "but I have to be." That night back home, what was left of it, Camille tucked Ava into a borrowed bed. Ava looked up at her, her voice small. "Mom, are you scared?" Camille brushed the hair from her daughter's forehead. "Yes, baby," she said softly, "but being brave isn't never being scared. It's doing what's right even when you're scared." Ava nodded slowly. And in that moment, Camille wasn't just a judge. She was a mother, a protector, a symbol of what hate can never burn down, love. They came to burn down her house. She came to burn down their system. Hey, family. If you've made it this far, I want you to take a deep breath. Because in this part, justice finally knocks on the door of hate. And this time, it doesn't knock politely. It was just after 4 a.m. The city still slept, except for those who had reason to stay awake. In the dark corners of a broken warehouse at the edge of town, Officer Karen Wolf and Travis McConnell were plotting. Plans, contacts, threats. They thought they were safe, untouchable, hidden. They were wrong. Across town, Chief Raymond Ellis stood by a command van, bulletproof vest tight, radio clipped to his chest. Behind him, a SWAT team stood ready, calm, focused, waiting. Next to him, Judge Camille Harris. No robe, no bench, just boots, jeans, and a resolve you could cut diamonds with. You sure you want to be here? Ellis asked. Camille didn't hesitate. They brought the fight to my home. I'm here to finish it. The signal was given, and the raid began. Flashbangs, boots, crunching concrete, shouts, lights, screams. The warehouse doors were ripped open like a secret finally exposed. In seconds, Travis McConnell was on the ground, zip-tied and breathless, caught mid-sentence. And Karen Wolf, she didn't run. She just stood there, arms crossed, as if defiance could still protect her. They let her out in cuffs, but her glare, still sharp, still venomous. And when her eyes met Camille's, she spit words that stung like acid. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you haven't. Camille stepped forward, calm, unmoving. It is over, Officer Wolf. You pick your side, and now you face the consequences. Karen was loaded into a van. The doors slammed shut. And just like that, the symbol of everything Camille had fought against was taken away. But this wasn't just about Karen. It was about the machine behind her, the lies, the silence, the system that let it fester. And now, thanks to Camille, that system was exposed. Later that day, under the soft glow of string lights in the town square, the community gathered. Reporters, neighbors, survivors, children who looked up with wonder. And Judge Camille Harris took the podium. Tonight, she said, we don't just celebrate an arrest. We celebrate a truth. That courage can rise higher than hatred. That power doesn't belong to those who scream the loudest, but to those who refuse to sit down quietly. The crowd stood still, listening, leaning in. Justice is not a gift, Camille said. It's a promise, and it's time we all started keeping it. Applause, tears, hugs between strangers, and among them, a little girl near the front, clutching her mother's hand, looking up at Camille like she was more than a judge, like she was a beacon. That night, Camille stood on her porch. The house still smelled faintly of smoke, but it was whole, and so was she. Ava came out, rubbing her eyes, curling into her mother's side. "Mom," she whispered, "is it over?" Camille pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "No, baby, not over, but we're safe now, and we're not alone. You can burn a house, but you can't burn a voice that's ready to rise. Hey, family." This is the part of the story that stays with you long after the screen fades to black, because while the fire may be out and the arrests have been made, what Camille Harris left behind wasn't just justice, it was a blueprint. Weeks had passed since the raid, and while life began to return to something close to normal, Camille knew normal wasn't the goal. She didn't fight to restore the way things were. She fought to push toward what they could become. One evening, she was invited to speak at a local community event. It wasn't the courtroom, no gavel, no robe, no titles, just folding chairs, porch lights, and people hungry for truth. She stepped up to the microphone, no notes, just heart. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. I want to talk about fear, she began, because we all feel it, especially when you look like me, when you are me. But fear should never be the reason you back down. The crowd was silent. You could hear the breath between sentences. Some people said I was crazy for not quitting. Some said I was reckless for staying on the bench. But let me tell you what would have been truly reckless, letting hate win without a fight. Heads nodded. A few murmurs of, "That's right." Camille looked out across the crowd, people of all shades, ages, stories, and then she asked the question that would define the rest of her speech. What kind of justice system are we leaving behind for our children? One where a badge protects bullies? One where a robe becomes a target? Or one where courage is louder than fear? She let the silence land, then she continued, slower now, deeper. I don't want my daughter to grow up thinking silence is safer than truth. I want her to know that when injustice shows up at your doorstep, you don't whisper, you stand. You don't run, you rise. And in that moment, it wasn't just Camille speaking. It was every Black woman who ever sat on a panel or stood alone in a room full of doubters. It was every mother who ever feared her child might not come home. It was every voice that had been dismissed, diminished, or deliberately erased. And finally, they were all heard. After the speech, people gathered around her. Some shook her hand, others cried. A young law student pulled her aside and said, I didn't think I could ever belong in this world, but seeing you, hearing you, I think I can. That night, Camille returned home. She stood on her porch again, this time not afraid, but filled with purpose. Ava came beside her and asked, Will they try to hurt us again? Camille wrapped her arm around her and whispered, They might, but we're ready. And then she looked at her daughter and said, Because baby, what they didn't know is we don't break. We build who was right, who was wrong. Officer Karen Wolf was wrong, not just in her words, but in her belief that power should be preserved through fear. Judge Camille Harris was right, because she stood not for herself, but for everybody who deserved to be seen, heard, and protected. Why did they act the way they did? Karen acted from fear of losing control. Camille acted from strength, to reclaim what was never theirs to take. Power without accountability is a weapon, but truth is a flame. You can try to smother it, you can throw smoke on it, you can even burn down a house. But if just one woman keeps speaking, the flame lights up again. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself, your mother, your daughter, your sister in Camille, then don't just watch. Comment, share, speak, subscribe to Black women, because our stories matter, not just to inspire, but to ignite. Let's keep that fire burning. Until next time, family, keep standing and never, ever sit quiet.